You're tuning in to Pocket Change.
The best parts of the night are between like the hours of 3 and 6. When like you're like so like lost in what's going on around you, the music has like become so intoxicating. There's like some like very hypnotic element to it, and like that's when like things like start to get interesting, and like you can't do that in Sydney, really, unless you throw something outside the boundaries of the law.
The number of underground warehouse parties around the city has increased dramatically since the introduction of lockout laws in 2016. They're giving the youth of Sydney a chance to experience music all night, free from security, responsible service of alcohol checks, and police. For local DJ Tim Boyd, these events are a way of getting his name out there, as the amount of legal venues he can play at regularly in the city has decreased.
And there's not as many people going out because of lockouts, and there's less venues doing like throwing these sorts of parties, which like lends itself to less opportunities for people like trying to like get a break or whatever.
Tim says the lack of regulation at underground parties allows for a more eclectic crowd than one you would find at a conventional nightclub.
I think you definitely meet some like pretty interesting people at those sorts of parties. It's cool to like kind of step out of your comfort zone and be exposed to things, and like be exposed to people's like other people's philosophy and like their way of life. That's probably something that you might not necessarily, I mean for me personally, like something I probably wouldn't necessarily come across.
Promoter Jonathan Carey says the restrictions of a club can sometimes ruin the feel of the party.
I know Sydney, for example, is kind of a part of lockouts, but for example now also has rules to do with like lumosity in clubs, so you have to have a certain, essentially can't be too dark now in clubs, which is just another factor that you can't control in clubs or venues that like that in Sydney anymore. So I think it's the stuff like that, which is like a general vibe of the party or the dance floor, is a lot more controllable if you're just doing it in your own space like that.
Many warehouse parties are held around industrial areas in the city's inner west, which provide revellers with a space to stay until the early hours of the morning, sometimes 5 or 6 a.m. Jonathan says keeping these parties going is not as easy as it sounds, but it's a risk he has to run.
That's probably one of the trickiest things, finding a space that you aren't going to make too much noise and be noticed or receive a complaint. Or, I mean, there's very few spots that I know that are like guaranteed to go until you desire, and I've been to heaps that have been shut down like before midnight, which is kind of a bummer.
Police often find out about secret locations, so party promoters and organisers have to constantly be on the lookout for new ones. Sydney City Councillor Jess Scully supports creative expression but is concerned for the safety of partygoers.
The big issue here for me really is about safety. I mean, of course people are going to find ways and places to party that are not within the rules. But the thing that is worrying is if government regulation is pushing people into unsafe situations. Certainly there were issues in King's Cross, but you had security, you had responsible service of alcohol, you had access to a hospital, you had transport, not great transport, but you had some transport. Quite often when you're out at a party in a remote location or a party that's underground, you don't have access to any of those things. So the worry here is that young people are being forced into dangerous situations because of oppressive laws.
Tim and Jonathan believe the Australian electronic music scene will suffer if lockout laws remain the same. But Councillor Scully says young people need to get more involved politically to really make a change.
I think we're suffering at the moment from a particularly bad case of a lack of intergenerational justice. But we're not as politically engaged, I think, as we could be. Young people have to get involved, and they've got to figure out where the power lies and how they can influence in a positive and meaningful way.
This is Maddie Stenmark reporting for Pocket Change News.